Hi guys, I'm Tiara Timora. This is my personal YouTube channel. And today I wanna chill with you and tell you about why for socialists, abundance and efficiency should be extremely important and why they haven't been for a really long time. So, why am I a socialist? So I want more things. And I also want them to work efficiently. That's a big reason for me. And I do believe that we can only achieve that through socialism. I want to tell you guys an anecdote that took place in the UK a few years ago. Basically, I got sick and I complained to a former friend that, the NHS wasn't working very well, apparently. I, really, in that moment, really didn't feel like I could rely on them. Or just I felt sort of medically unsafe, if you will, which when you're OCD about medical stuff, that makes sense anyway, but I definitely didn't feel like there was an ease in that context to get medical help. And basically she exploded on me, got super defensive, immediately was like, the NHS is the best thing in the world, you're just a spoiled brat, you shouldn't be complaining at all, this is ridiculous, the NHS has saved my life, and the only problem with it is basically you. I think she did in passing mention maybe it's been a little underfunded, but she didn't focus on it at all. And at the time, to be honest, I was just ignorant. I didn't know how things worked. And I would have much benefited from a rational, realistic, and basically intellectually honest explanation of hey, there are reasons why the system is not working. Obviously, mainly that it's being underfunded, and we're gonna go back to this later in this video, but basically it's not really a system that's working as it should, as it would ideally. Was it less underfunded and more democratic in its workings? That was never said to me, and I just find it a pathetic strategy to just tell someone, deny that a system that's obviously not working well, to deny that is just what do you expect people to see the sky of a blue color, and you're telling them no, it's actually red, and they're seeing the blue. People realize when something is not working, and just gaslighting them is just fundamentally bad politics, and it's not gonna get us anywhere. So I think we need to be a little bit more ambitious and actually demand that things work, and demand that of ourselves and of our own organization and our own goals and priorities as a left. And the reality is that, as I previously brought up in this channel, a draw away from an agentic subject, the working class having been one and should be the one right now, this has meant a draw away from humanism and from people ourselves, actually, being at the center of a left political project, and basically substituted by reverence to the planet and animals, and any subject that is perceived as inherently less agentic and more victimizable. And, we're seen as, colonizing viruses or something. And we can basically just suck it up, right? And, to me, going back to his memory, it does sound like that suck it up zeitgeist there is against people in general. Not a left thing to me. Well, it is right now, but, it definitely shouldn't be. So this book came out in the US recently, which has met a lot of criticism from the current left. And basically, I'm bringing you guys a lot from an article on Jacobin, a very recent one that I found extremely interesting as a response to this book and the criticism of it, by Matt Huber, Lee Phillips, Fred Stafford, where they basically, defend an ambitious, human-centered socialism of abundance, I would describe. In Jacobin, they basically, analyze this Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson bestseller, Abundance. So, they basically argue that this book is a serious oversimplification. It is a serious oversimplification to reduce Klein and Thompson's entire argument to a de-risking playbook, which is what a lot of people are concluding as they analyze and read the book. So what they say in this article instead is that Klein and Thompson are simply pointing out that redistribution alone is not enough unless the public sector can actually reliably deliver and build real public goods cheaply and efficiently. As Klein recently put it in an essay for the New York Times, if Democrats are taxing people to build high-speed rail, that high-speed rail should exist. If they are taxing people to build electric vehicle chargers, those chargers should get built. If they are promising lower drug prices in Medicare, those lower prices should show up quickly. They go on to discuss conflicts amongst progressives and liberals on the question of centralized versus small-scale production, which I think has a lot to do with the question of, efficiency, abundance, and, why some things might not be working and how we should aim for them to work. Basically, they go on to where Marx stood, okay? And what I think is they bring up what I think is akin to populist frameworks, which is the anti-monopolists believed society's problems were a result of corruption atop society, among robber barons, political bosses, corporate boards, and snooty lawyers. Their solution was to break up concentrated power and restore competition among smaller-scale enterprises like the farmers and artisans who made up the class base for this Jeffersonian vision, one that prized decentralized economic life, local self-sufficiency, and an aversion to centralized authority. Does that sound familiar? To me, it does sound a lot like current populist views of basically break up the monopolies. It definitely falls in that camp for me. And then going back to how Marx would regard things as opposed to this, others saw the emergence of large-scale capitalist enterprises as not only inevitable, but progressive, offering undeniable efficiencies and productivity gains. Even as early as the mid-19th century, Marx and Engels had predicted that the small-scale production of the peasantry and petty bourgeoisie was destined for the dustbin of history. Yet these reformers share the anti-monopolist concern about concentrated corporate power. The goal? To establish a new vanguard of competent, centralized authority and public power. Yes, and I lean much more also on that latter approach. But again, like, the question is, why have attempts to do that not really worked? An example being the NHS that I was discussing before. So quite a centralized approach, ideally, but it hasn't worked. And if it's centralized, how should it be centralized? It's not that simple, right? So what's behind this? So what they say in the article is what's needed, it is not just a liberalism that builds, but a socialist left that builds, and builds differently, with democratic planning, redistribution, and working class power at its center. So why don't things work, right? What they say is socialists can offer a materialist explanation. The explosion of NGOs, legalism, and NIMBY blockages to development, and the extra democratic politics that this ecosystem embraces are themselves the product of the neoliberal revolution of the 1970s and 80s. They represent the shift toward a technocratic, highly undemocratic form of governance that cedes power to unaccountable bureaucracies. And that is, they are spotting the problem of why these programs that we should be fighting for cannot really work right now. And it's due to this, extremely undemocratic ecosystem that they're describing, right? And honestly, I would say that they're describing quite a technocratic approach. And populism, I would add, is the other face of this coin. There is a fundamental lack of working class organization and control, both behind these sort of technocratic approaches and basically a sort of populist approach that is based on things like charismatic leader, good versus bad guys feelings, rather than on a solid mass class-based working class organization. I definitely see a lot of parallels there. And I mean, you can look at the protagonism of like NGOism within populist projects, and this becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly, in my opinion. I will read another quote from this article. Those of us who have long worked in climate, clean energy, and extraction, who come from the left and remain connected to industrial labor, can tell you plainly, it's both unaccountable markets and unaccountable NGO, academia, legal, bureaucratic class that are stalling public progress, right? So yes, it's a mix of all of that. These legal, bureaucrats, the NGO and academia sort of coming together, and basically being two sides of the same coin, technocracy and populism that basically, if we look at them, are ultimately very closely related or led by professional managerial class individuals, and a reliance on, basically professionals, experts, but never working class organizing. I loved this article. I thought it was extremely insightful. There's a lot more to it. If I added more, it would have just be me like reading it, so please go check it out fully. I love the authors. Very, very reliable in my opinion. Definitely go check it out. And I think they make great points, right? Because it's, they are signaling the predominance of these sort of like, professional class, not just in terms of, bringing forth this therapized politics, this therapized culture, but also getting in the way of public universal programs actually working and being working class led, because they're actually sort of professional led, and so another example, and this is a bit larger than like an anecdotal one, of an accountable and undemocratic professional technocratic privatizing class takeover, are the workings of British NHS, again, not just in my anecdotal evidence, but a bit of a larger analysis that I would recommend as a read. For sure, it's titled Olympian Contradictions by George Hoare in Damage Magazine. And so I'm gonna read you guys a bit of a description that he makes of the NHS situation that to me really echoes this landscape that's been described in the other article. So he says, the NHS was one of the most contested battlegrounds of British neoliberalization. This battle over the privatization of public services started with the Thatcher and major conservative governments and was put on steroids, so to speak, by Tony Blair and New Labour. Perhaps the key policy in this story was the widespread use of private finance initiatives, PFIs, launched in 1992 by Major, which aimed at creating public-private partnerships, PPPs, for the delivery of NHS services and the construction of new hospitals. These contracts, often awarded in highly dubious circumstances, represented terrible value for the public, with hospitals being built late and over budget, while unworkable IT system upgrades became a familiar thorn in the side of anyone working in the NHS. More importantly, for the neoliberal proponents of PFIs and PPPs, these initiatives hollowed out the NHS itself, making it incapable of building out or delivering key services and demoralizing staff, while establishing a cadre of middle management PFI contract overseers opposed to the social democratic ethos of the NHS as an institution. And we see the same thread, don't we? I think, this situation where there's ample bureaucracy, where there's these public-private partnerships, where there's this middle management coming in, and basically fundamentally a neoliberalization, right, of the whole system that is fundamentally undemocratic, because this is taking the NHS further away from what should be the goal, which should be a more democratized system that is worker-led, and veered towards, being universalist, and surely centralized, but in a way where the workers take the lead. Here, sounds like it's more middle management and, private entities taking the lead, and it's creating inefficiency, it's slowing down progress, and it's being backed up by both conservative and Labour parties, right? So I think it's entirely connected to these draw away from fundamentally working class power. I also want to go into the case of renewable energies and make a case for nuclear. Because if we're ambitious, we're going to need better energy, right? Better power. So I'm going to read from, again, Lee Phillips in Jacobin, from the article For and Against Climate Progress in the Atomic Garden. I have read this article multiple times. I always make reference to it when, discussing energy, discussing against degrowth, and, analyzing the pros and cons of nuclear. This article is brilliant. And I really encourage you guys to read through the whole thing, because the points he makes about nuclear, I think will shock some of you. It's brilliant, and Lee Phillips is someone I really trust, climate-wise especially. So in this article, he analyzes the book Nuclear is Not the Solution by M.V. Ramana. And so one thing that is discussed, since we're talking about inefficiency and arguing for abundance, is the fundamental problem of wind and solar energy's intermittency, okay? So long duration energy storage options such as pumped storage hydro, underground compressed air, or gravity storage, essentially stacking blocks and dropping them, are geographically constrained or inadequate for the energy required. For instance, the 25 megawatts / 100 megawatts energy vault in Rudong, China, the world's first gravity storage option, is the size of a skyscraper and provides just 4 hours of storage. To ensure reliability during those occasions that VRE is unavailable for weeks would require the construction of colossal amounts of energy storage that in many places would hardly ever be used, but would still need to be there just in case. Overbuilding wind and solar resources to cover large areas where wind may be blowing elsewhere still requires significant infrastructure to connect up these resources with a lot more transmission lines. This is called firming VRE. Although, to be clear, such firming only reduces the problem of unreliability, it doesn't solve it. But if there is clean, firm power, at least somewhere in the mix, this reduces the need to build these firming resources. Expensive, rarely called upon long-duration storage, overbuild, and extra transmission. Lee continues, a tent is a much cheaper option for shelter than a house. But there is a reason that we all don't live in tents. Wind and solar don't provide the same services that firm electricity resources do, because they aren't available whenever we need them. And there's no amount of being intellectually dishonest and saying this is not true, this is a right-wing point, that's gonna save us from that being the reality. Of course, though, if you do think we are a virus on the earth, and again, going back to my first point, if you think that's how little we're worth and we should just suck it up to let the planet and the animals live in peace because we are, I guess, too agentic to be interesting, then I can see why this would be okay for you. Just go live in a tent, I know, not plenty, but a disturbing number and intensity of people who just are happy to live in a van and honestly have treated dogs better than they've treated humans. Just keeping it 100. So I will continue. Let's go to nuclear, and is it working? Is it not working? Why not? So, Lee says, it is undeniable that roughly since the late 1980s, nuclear plant costs, overruns, and delays have been common, especially in the West. The causes for these delays are numerous and complex. Constant regulatory changes during construction, often driven by successful anti-nuclear campaigns and the appointment of activists, allies to regulatory bodies, are a major factor. Long pauses following events like Chernobyl, 9/11, and Fukushima, as well as the effects of neoliberal energy sector liberalization, have also contributed. So, yet again, I can spot the echoes of the same thread of fundamentally neoliberalization of a sector, of this disproportional role of activists, NGOism, and their professionals, their experts, who systematically put, the environment or their preferred industries, and ultimately also economic interests over, again, the working class, this bureaucratic aspect to the whole landscape. I see this running thread also hindering the workings of nuclear energy. And, I want to point out that the solution proposed by this book's author, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, is, you guessed it, degrowth. Of course, because there is no other solution right now if you don't make use of, nuclear energy. Which, by the way, is clean, or extremely cleaner than other options, which is extremely well laid out in this article that I'm directing you all to. It's really, really brilliant. And it just lays out the details and intricacies of nuclear, and again, of other forms of energy proposed by this book's author, who, admits they won't really work that well, therefore we need to degrow. To me, the circle closes. Let me know what you guys think, if you find yourself in agreement with me for this one, especially because I don't I don't claim to be an expert in, energy, especially climate. And also, there are a lot of details here that I would suggest you go to the articles for. But I will say the picture that emerges to me is extremely aligned with the analysis that I've been sort of going for and taking forth in this channel, and that I always take with me. This world of non-places, of fundamentally being cut adrift and being told to think positively about that, without the actual anchor of working class organizing and the working class as the agentic subject. And I think, what we see in these number of cases is the takeover of an unaccountable and undemocratic professional, technocratic, neoliberalizing class, that is fundamentally anti-working class and, to me, anti-democracy, to be honest. And that's keeping us unagentic and alienated from institutions such as the state, right? Through which we could very well make universal, rather centralized programs work. But again, they need to be brought forth by and thought of for the working class. There's no other way, to me, that a socialist, Marxist, humanist project could work. This was it for today. All the reading is required for this one. Credits to the brilliant authors. And yeah, I hope that was clear. Extremely complex topic for sure. Ultimately, my goal is to make us refocus into a more ambitious project. I think that's a huge point in this, ambition and really, wanting more, not less. And to that end, we need to make things work and actually not only fight for, the good things versus the bad things. No. The good things that we want, we have to figure out how to make them work. And to me, it's actually pretty great because they will work in the same way that we will actually attain power, which, again, is a working class organization. Working class power. Okay, this was it for today. Please do like the video if you did and subscribe to support me, and I will see you back here very soon.